So recently I was asked by a viewer if I could talk a little bit more about neurodivergence and how that particular topic, that particular area has intersections, so points of overlap with the question about the INFJ personality. Okay, maybe the NI dominant personality in general, but especially the INFJ personality. I suspect this viewer identifies as INFJ. So in the past, I've been known to make few references to neurodivergence versus neurotypicality. I've been known to make some occasional comments about the fact that we ought to be a little cautious about making the jump straight from the idea that an INFJ is necessarily a neurodivergent. I even went so far as to say that most INFJs probably aren't neurodivergent, simply because neurodivergence is not that common. And I was also saying that as far as I was concerned, I thought that I probably was neurotypical. Right? That was also a way of saying, look, I'm an INFJ on the internet. I make a lot of videos about INFJs, and I do make a number of videos about what makes INFJs different, unique as a type. And despite saying this, I was also trying to remind people that despite saying all this, I wasn't making the claim that INFJs are all neurodivergent, or even that there are neurodivergent in the majority. Okay, so what are some of the arguments, again, in favor of the view that the majority of INFJs are not neurodivergent? Well, usually the way that we think of people being neurodivergent is by associating that with particular, what would you call them, disorders, what are called disorders, or disorder spectra, that we associate with neurodivergence. So, for example, people on the autism spectrum disorder are now known to be neurodivergent. Again, when we talk about being neurodivergent, you need to keep in mind, this is not about having a unique mind. It's about your neurological makeup, your physical, biological makeup being divergent from the norm. It's a physical phenomenon. It's not a mental phenomenon, although of course it has mental ramifications, mental manifestations. So autism spectrum disorder, neurodivergence in this sense. What are other examples of neurodivergence? Well, one that is very well known, quite common, possibly a little bit overdiagnosed according to some of my psychologist acquaintances, is ADHD. Okay, so attention deficit disorder with or without hyperactivity. That is another disorder or disorder spectrum that is known to have a neurological basis. Okay, so properly qualifies as neurodivergent. And then maybe as a third example, we can talk about the DIS conditions. So when I mean DIS, I'm talking about dyslexia, dyspraxia, dysphagia, and a few other ones. That they're also known now to be cases of neurodivergence. We need to keep in mind that one of the reasons why the concept of neurodivergence became widely utilized is because for a long time in the psychiatric field, it was assumed that these conditions were not neurological, didn't have a physical basis, didn't have a genetic component, that they were principally the result of less than ideal parenting. So what was often said was, the blame was put on the mother. Not good enough mothering could lead to autism spectrum disorder, what is now known as ADHD, and the other cases of neurodivergence. So neurodivergence came into, sort of made its appearance on the scene, became part of our vocabulary as a way of re-emphasizing that in these cases, we're not really talking about conditions that have anything to do with the way you were brought up, right? They would exist nonetheless. It's very different from someone who is someone who has an obsessive compulsive disorder, or someone who has a hysterical personality organization, or someone who has a borderline personality organization, although borderline has a genetic component, but there's also an educational component, or someone who has a narcissistic disorder, or someone who has, etc., etc. Neurodivergence means it's neurological. Don't look for the explanation in the child's psychological development in a particular family and educational environment, okay? So, and then looking again at some of the well-known cases, we can easily see that most INFJs are not on the autism spectrum, although some are. Most INFJs are not don't have ADHD, although some do, okay? And most INFJs don't have dyspraxia, dysphagia, or dyslexia, although some do, okay? So clearly there is an area of overlap that we have no reason to assume is any smaller or bigger than there will be overlap between these and the INTP personality, the ISFP personality, the ICJ personality, the ENFJ personality, and so on and so forth. So you see that I think to that extent, I maintain the idea that there is no reason to think that neurodivergence and INFJ are perfectly mapping onto each other. Excuse me. Now, another temptation that some people seem to have is to say, well, sure, some INFJs may have neurodivergent brains, maybe according to classifications that I just listed earlier, or other ones, because there's obviously other ones too. But we should start thinking about, this is not me speaking, this is the other person, this imagined other person speaking. We should start thinking about INFJ itself as a form of neurodivergence. This is a temptation that I've come across in many viewers and readers and people I talk to sometimes. Is like, what if INFJ itself is a form of neurodivergence? And maybe like INFJs in themselves neurodivergent have other forms of neurodivergence sometimes, such as ASD or ADHD, and so on. Here, I think that we have to be really careful not to let our ego ideals get confused with what often are pretty atypical conditions that are not to be idealized. A lot of people, and it's not just INFJs, a lot of people like the idea of neurodivergence because I think maybe they know they're not that common in terms of their personalities, okay? So they have INFJ as an explanation for that. It's not enough for them because somehow, although the descriptions of INFJ are satisfying to them and explain certain things, they lack the physical grounding, like the absolute scientific basis that would ultimately reassure them about how unique they are. And they find in neurodivergence the projected image of this perfect level of reassurance, which is in fact illusory. It would not lead them there, but that's what explains it. So we have to be really careful about assuming too quickly that having a unique personality has to have a physical basis. It's not the case. But I'll explore more on this in the next video. Okay, guys? So be patient, because I will tell you about a category of neurodivergence that there are reasons to think INFJs would resonate with. But I will tell you more in the next video. In the meantime, don't forget, guys, that I've written 2 books on the INFJ personality that you may be interested in. The Infinite Soul, my latest book, INFJ Life in the Modern World. Look at the cover, it's very nice. Look at this woman. She is full of NI, clearly. One of the things that this book argues is that INFJs often find that the world is hostile, and they find it difficult to negotiate that hostility. And this book argues that in order to lead a purposeful, meaningful, and rich life as an INFJ, embracing your authentic INFJ existence and identity is key. How to work that out, how to go about it, this book explains it. Check the first link below for a reference, and its prequel is always a goodie as well, The Ecstatic Soul, a new look at the INFJ personality, which is the deepest investigation you'll find of the INFJ mind, INFJ consciousness, what it's like to be an INFJ and what it's like to think like an INFJ. Check all the reviews to make you titillate even further, and those books go well together, as you can see. Now, just as a finishing comment, don't forget my Patreon page is also available below if you'd like to become a patron. We have opened a Discord server, so you can join our Discord. You can ask me questions directly. You get bonus video content, in-depth discussions of topics from my books or from my mainstream YouTube every 2 weeks. There's lots there, and you really help me keep going with the channel. I could not do it without you, so thank you very much, and see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.